We will see Prime Minister Mark Carney get his first handshake with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House around 11:30 a.m. Eastern. And with those images, the first analysis will begin. Canadians will be watching what they say, each look on their face, and their gestures as well. For Prime Minister Carney, the Oval Office will amount to his most watched time yet on the world stage. It's a walk on a political and diplomatic tightrope that's difficult enough, but there's also the potential that Trump and his team could try to make Carney wobble. So let's talk about all of this with someone who was in Washington to cover it, traveled with the Prime Minister's delegation. Matina Stevis-Gridneff is the Canada Bureau Chief for the New York Times. We spoke to her during the campaign and delighted to have another conversation from Washington this morning. So welcome back.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me back.
The fact that you are there in Washington, having traveled with the Canadian delegation to cover this meeting, makes me ask why. How important do you think it is?
We think it's very important. I think it's very important. I think any interaction between the Canadian Prime Minister and the President of the United States in this historic low moment for the relationship between the two countries can only be important and high stakes, even though there's nothing exactly specific that the two men have said they will talk about.
And even interesting, after yesterday's comments in the White House from Donald Trump, so nonchalant and saying he wasn't even really sure what the Prime Minister was coming to Washington to talk to him about. I mean, did you buy that, or was it just a pose? Do you have a sense of what Donald Trump himself is hoping to gain from this discussion today?
Sure. I think that we are watching the opening of what will probably be a lengthy negotiation about different elements of the relationship between the two countries. We know that so much is up in the air. It goes beyond tariffs. I mean, the other day we heard apparently films are going to be tariffed 100% that are made outside of the United States. And where do many American films get made? In Canada. And so I think this is just the beginning. I do think the president is aware that he has an advantage. He's the one who's applying the tariffs. He's the one threatening the country's sovereignty. He's the one even saying like, this border, what is this border? I don't like it. It's old and artificial. So he's got the cards, and the prime minister is walking into sort of the lion's den in that situation. And so I think both men want to meet each other and understand each other, and they'll do that today. But beyond that, I don't know what they're trying to get out of this meeting, frankly.
It's interesting when you use the reference to he holds the cards. That makes me think immediately of what he said to Ukrainian President Zelensky when he was there, you have no cards. Do we have a sense, maybe from yesterday, or maybe you're getting a sense there, of what version of Donald Trump will be in those meetings with Prime Minister Carney today?
It's such a good question, because we are all becoming these Trump observer psychologists. What mood is the president in? Yesterday we heard he has a bit of a cold and he's kind of cranky. So we don't. The indication so far is that he has been sort of broadly respectful of Prime Minister Carney, called him a nice gentleman. We all know that sounds a lot better than what he used to call former Prime Minister Trudeau. But we don't really know the extent to which President Trump will reach for the rhetoric of 51st state. And I think this is really what a lot of us are going to be watching for. One positive development, I think, for the Canadian side is that this huddle inside the Oval Office where President Trump takes leaders to take a photograph with, and, the press shouts questions and so on. And he often makes some of the most harsh remarks in that context inside the Oval. That was originally scheduled to happen after their working lunch. That's now been moved before the working lunch. So I feel that this is possibly going to be a situation where they're not going to be warmed up yet. Things are going to be a little stiffer, more formal. That could play to the prime minister's advantage. But even the fact that we're talking about the choreography and the mood of the president in such close detail just tells you that we are in a really unpredictable territory. And there's a lot riding on it for Canada, for Canadians. The Prime Minister knows this walking in.
It's difficult to prepare when it is so volatile and unpredictable. As you flew down with the Canadian delegation, I'm just curious, any interactions, any conversations that might speak to you about how Canada is preparing? You've talked about how not just the Prime Minister is traveling, but also the three key ministers with him, Mélanie Joly, Dominic LeBlanc, David McGuinty, who have various key roles on the trade relationship file. Any conversations or, as I said, any indication of how the preparation and strategy planning is going?
Well, not so much, because apparently it is all consuming. We know that the Prime Minister met in a sort of informal setting yesterday with American and Canadian business representatives. But other than that, we've been told that he has been full-time with his team preparing for this meeting. And I think the reason for that intensive preparation, I think it is well known, and Mark Carney has like a name for this, that he's the best prepared guy in the room. So I'm sure that comes from the Prime Minister's desire to really be able to master the entire agenda. But I also think it's because of this element of unpredictability that President Trump brings to the room. And I think the Prime Minister wants to be able to tackle whatever the president then comes up with when they meet, because it could be anything. This could be a pretty anodyne, formal, polite meeting, or he could just bring up all the issues that he brought up when he spoke with former Prime Minister Trudeau in February, such as water sharing agreements, the dairy, the finance. And so I think Prime Minister Carney and his team, and particularly, as you mentioned, these three ministers who were part of the negotiating team all the way back to last year, they're going to be huddling and prepping precisely for all these different scenarios.
Can I ask, it is a very painful trade war he's launched on Canada for sure, but not only with Canada, as we see him, unleash this on the world. And the world will be watching today, it seems, in terms of the kinds of attention and headlines this is already getting. Let's just talk about the global stakes as you see them, Matina.
Absolutely. I mean, I think from the beginning of Canada's crazy political story that we've been experiencing over the past 5 months or so, we have seen huge interest from our global audience at the New York Times. What is really happening is the world is looking to Canada to understand America. I remember Mélanie Joly actually said this back at the beginning of when we realized this was going to be a crisis and things were not going to go smoothly. She said, the rest of the world tries to look at what Canada's doing and what's happening to Canada to understand what's coming to them next. And I think we are watching an evolution of that. I believe that Mark Carney is being viewed globally as this sort of really serious guy, and Canada's relationship with the United States is really unique and uniquely close. And that's why this hurts so much right now, right? And so I feel that both the Prime Minister and the country are attracting the world's attention as they try to work through what has been just so tumultuous and so painful.
Matina, thanks so much. Matina has a piece in the New York Times today and obviously there to cover it, so we will read your assessment of things as they unfold starting later this morning. I appreciate my time with you as always. Thanks
So much. Thanks for having me.